we have a quiet little motel, when in fact it has now become known as the scene of the crime.
You have a vacancy?
Oh, we have 12 vacancies.
You know, this is the first place that looks like it's hiding from the world.
I think that we're all in our private traps, clamped in them. And none of us can ever get out.
Is anyone at home?
Oh, that must be my mother.
Is anything wrong?
Am I acting as if there's something wrong?
She's not missing so much as she's run away.
Put me down. Mother! Oh, God! Mother!
What are you running away from?
She looked like a wrong one to you?
It's not as if she were a maniac. She just goes a little mad sometimes.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Hello everyone, I am Sean and welcome to my Horror Corner. First episode of the brand new channel. As I mentioned, if you watched the introductory episode, I did have a channel last year, early into this year I believe, but ended up having to shut it down and take care of some things where life is concerned. But now I'm back getting started, and as I said, we are going to be starting things off with what can be considered, what is widely considered, what, in my opinion, is the first slasher movie. I know, there is some debate on that. I've heard, arguments and things like that, and I know some people consider Peeping Tom, which came out a few months before Psycho, the first slasher film. I've never seen Peeping Tom. I've read a little bit about it. I know of it. I know the premise. I've never seen the movie. Um, I've heard other people mention a few things prior, even to that time frame. But to me, uh, when you look at the impact, the cultural impact, popularity, just everything around Psycho really is what got it all started. I mean, Psycho is a movie that's still highly revered today. It's an Alfred Hitchcock classic, and I think it's really what started off the slasher subgenre. I think it's can't guarantee it, but I think it's possible if we didn't have Psycho, we might not have movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Some of those that are A Nightmare on Elm Street, some of the classic horror franchises. We may not have those. We never gotten Psycho back in 1960. So, for me, being such a huge slasher fan, if I'm going to start off this YouTube channel, there's no better place to start than with Psycho. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Before I get into it, let me just say I really do appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on the videos, leave me some comments, let me know what you think about the movie, let me know what you think about my channel. As I mentioned in the intro video, I realize the background is not quite as great as what I had before, but I just don't have the space and the room in the area like I had at one point to do this. I'm kind of confined to doing it to my room now, so you also get to see my hamper and my bed and bathroom door and other bullshit that I know you don't care to see, but sorry, it is what it is. So, but let's get into Psycho. So I'm going to start. I'm going to put my glasses on. I know it'll cause a little bit of a glare. Apologize for that, but I just want to read. I think most people, especially horror movie fans and people that might watch this channel, have probably seen Psycho. But I'm sure there's some out there that have not. A friend of mine had never seen it until very recently. So, just in case there's nobody out there that's seen it and you're watching this video, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of it now. If you have seen the movie, but it's been a long time, maybe this will help refresh you. But again, I kind of feel like most people know what this is about. Um, so, Psycho, Phoenix secretary Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, is on the run after stealing $40,000 from her employer in order to run away with her boyfriend Sam Loomis, played by John Gavin. She's overcome with exhaustion during a heavy rainstorm. Traveling back roads to avoid the police, she stops for the night at the Bates Motel and meets a polite but highly strung Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, a young man with an interest in taxidermy and a difficult relationship with his mother. That's a brief synopsis of Psycho. It kind of gives you the idea of what the film is about. Um, I don't plan on walking through everything, as far as the plot goes, but I do have some notes here and some things I do want to cover. Before we get into that, though, let's just give some basics about Psycho. It was released June 16th, 1960 in New York City, and then September 8th, 1960 throughout the United States. Um, Directed, of course, by the legendary Alfred Hitchcock, screenplay by Joseph Stefano, based on the book by Robert Bloch, just titled Psycho, starring Anthony Perkins, Vera Miles, John Gavin, Martin Balsam, may have butchered that name, John McIntyre, and Janet Leigh. Cinematography done by John Russell, music by Bernard Herrmann. Production company was Shamley Productions, and it was distributed by Paramount Pictures. Has a runtime of 109 minutes, budget of 806,000, almost $807,000, and made $50 million at the box office. Now, one thing that I have mentioned in the past, I did on the previous channel, I mentioned it quite a bit, and I'm going to mention it now too. I don't know that it's 100% accurate, um, but I've heard it from a few different sources, and it makes sense to me. I've always been, heard that in order for a movie to truly be successful, it needs to make three times its budget. When you factor in production costs and advertising and salaries and everything else, a movie to really be a successful film needs to make three times its budget. Well, if the budget was, like I said, I believe 807,000 and it made 50 million, Psycho did way beyond three times. Highly successful film. Um, Coming out in 1960. I mentioned this before as well on my previous channel. When I watch some of these older films, movies like Psycho or movies like the Universal Monster movies, which I'm also a huge fan of, I really try to put myself back as much as possible in that time, in that frame of time, in that window of time, because things have changed so very, very much. We go to movies now. I recently went and saw the night it came out, Terrifier 3. Completely different type of horror movie than Psycho. I went just this past weekend and watched Smile 2. Completely different type of film, both dealing maybe with some psychological horror, but there's today we're so much more about the graphics. Unfortunately, a lot of times CGI. Um, there's just so much more shown and to be seen now with the way movies are made than what was made back then. So I try to mentally put myself back in that time frame a little bit to see the impact that it would have on the audience. Now, granted, I don't know exactly what people back then thought. I get that. I don't know 100% what kind of things they were used to seeing, but I can, from reading and study and that kind of stuff, get a pretty good idea. So I can see how a movie like Psycho, with especially a few things throughout the movie that we'll talk about, could have really had a huge impact on people. Um, but I think this movie uh, may be better than a lot from that time frame. Holds up so very, very well. Um, yeah, I don't want to get too much into that because then I'll start talking about other movies as well. But I think Psycho just holds up so, so well. Um, it's definitely a classic film, and definitely you can tell by the numbers of how well it made. It really got people's attention back then. Uh, Alfred Hitchcock is so well known. It's considered one of his best films. It's arguably his most famous and influential work. Um, it's just such a classic movie. It's often ranked as one of the greatest films of all time, not just in horror, but films in general. So huge success. It was followed up. Alfred Hitchcock passed away in 1980, and Universal Pictures produced follow-ups. There have been three sequels, a remake, a made-for-television spinoff, and a television series. So it did birth an entire franchise. we kind of did discuss the plot a little bit. So let's now get into the movie itself and kind of walk through it and talk about some of the things that I really liked and appreciated, and a few of the things maybe that I didn't. So one of the things that I hear from more of today's generation um, is that this movie is slow, especially in the beginning. While I disagree, and I'll explain why I disagree here shortly, but I can see though why people would think that. First of all, it's a black and white film, and I have a love of black and white cinema. When I look back again, as I mentioned earlier, the Universal monster movies, movies like Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, The Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I absolutely love these films, and there's something about them uh, and them being in black and white that it may not make sense, but to me they just look beautiful. They're just such great works of art, and I think even though Psycho comes out, 30 some odd years later than some of these movies, I think it has that same appeal. I think black and white is fantastic for this film. I don't think that deters from it, but I know some people just don't like black and white films, and it would deter from that, and I understand that. I just happen to disagree. I think this film looks incredible, um, especially for 1960, and I just think the black and white adds something to it for this movie. So I think it looks great. Um, but where some of the people talk about it being slow, we get the introduction on the movie. We have Marion, which I will say that you know we I was I'm going to get into more performances here in just a few moments. But when you look at Marion was played, as I said, by Janet Leigh. I think she does a very good job in this movie. She gives a very good performance. The gentleman that plays her boyfriend Sam, John Gavin, I question his performance, and I'll talk about that a little bit throughout this. But I think that she does a good job. Janet Leigh gives a good performance as Marion here. But the beginning of the film and why I think so many people uh, think it's slower is you get Marion, you open up with Marion and Sam, and they're in this hotel and they're talking about their relationship, and it becomes very obvious that they are having an affair, that Sam is still married, and that this is beginning to bother Marion, that she is ready for him to be divorced and for them to be able to be together instead of having to hide everything. He says that he's ready. He just finances seem to be a lot of the reason why he can't do that. Is he's still married? He needs funds for a divorce. He's trying to work some things out, and so until that's done, he's hoping that Marion will just remain patient so that they can be together. But he needs money, and that kind of sets up the rest of the film. This beginning here. It's not an incredibly long opening, but it does give us a pretty good idea of where we're going with this. We then get to continue on with Marion, and we find out that she's a real estate secretary. Um, One of the things that's funny to me about this film is in watching it, um, she's given by her boss $40,000 off of a sale that they've made, and he wants her. This is on a Friday. He wants her to take it to a safe deposit box and put it there, and then on Monday they will make the deposit into the bank. Um, Going back and watching this film now, I don't know what banking was like back in 1960. Um, it is a little confusing to me to see that that's their plan and see that that's what they're doing. I work in the banking industry. I've been in banking for quite some time. And, if you're going to a bank to put something into a safe deposit box, why not just deposit it while you're there? I mean, that's the way banking today works. So, why you would put it in a safe deposit box and wait a weekend before you would make the deposit, I don't know. But, that's just a small question I have and don't understand. But, I mean, hey, maybe things were a lot different in the banking world in 1960. Who knows? That part just strikes me as odd. But, and again, $40,000, somebody steals $40,000 today, they're not going to get too far on that. So, but I'm sure back in 1960, that was a huge, huge sum of money that would have made a huge difference. So there is that. And that being said, uh, Marion has also commented about not feeling well, and so she's going to take the funds and she's going to go put them in the safe deposit box, and then she's going to go home and go to bed because she has a headache, is what she tells her her boss. we discover that the temptation is too much for Marion, and she ends up stealing the $40,000 and taking off. And her plan is to go to take this money to Sam. It will pay for his divorce. It will help them get started on our future. And she, blinded by love, I guess you could say, is going to get all of her dreams to come true just by taking this $40,000. Excuse me. Um, so she takes the money. She takes off. Um, we then get to, there is a scene where her boss is walking across the street and he sees her. You get a little bit of tension there for a few moments as he seems confused. And then later, as Marion's driving, she's, gotten very tired. She apparently pulls over on the side of the road and falls asleep in the car for a little while. A police officer shows up. She's, he wakes her up. Now she's very concerned because she knows she's stolen this money. And even though the police officer doesn't know what's going on, she is, the fact that she's acting so off has him very suspicious of her. And so, even though he lets her go, he begins to follow her. She gets into a town, and because he's following her, she decides to purchase a new car. So she gets into a car lot, trades her car in, buys this new car with some of the money she has, and takes off. Um, not bad. I mean, I can see why people would think again that this is a little bit slow. I don't think it is. I think it does a pretty good job of the storytelling. I don't know exactly, and I should have made note of that, of exactly how long it takes before um, she gets to the motel. Because what happens now after she gets the new car is she continues to drive. It's nighttime, it's storming, she's tired, she can't hardly see because it's raining so hard, and she comes across the Bates Motel and decides to spend the night there, which is where we now get to meet Norman, played by Anthony Perkins. Um, I don't feel like this is too slow. Again, I do see where some people could, but I think it's a great job of setting everything up, of putting everything else into play. I think, again, the performance by Janet Leigh is very good. Um, there are some things that I question again, but they're so minor. Not just the whole banking aspect. I mean, I'm sure that's just me being in banking, but again, why um, she's got this money, she's wanting to avoid attention. So you can almost understand why she would think get another car. That way, people can't trace the other one to her or something. But at the same time, she knows the cop is following her. She knows the cop is watching. So I don't know what she was truly trying to accomplish in this. But again, these are just minor things that I think about when I watch this film now. I had seen bits and pieces of this movie years ago. As I said before when I had a channel, and I'll briefly touch on it, but as a child, I did not like horror films. Absolutely everything scared me. My aunt was a fan of horror films. My father liked some of them. And so I saw bits and pieces of different horror films with them over the years. But most of the time, just seeing a little bit was enough for me, and I was scared and done. I remember seeing part of Friday the 13th, I think part two, um, and being terrified to ever go camping because I was just convinced that Jason was out there and going to kill us all if we ever went camping. I remember seeing part of Halloween and hoping that my parents would never hire a babysitter because I knew if we had a babysitter that Michael Myers was coming after us. Anytime I ever heard a chainsaw, I immediately thought Leatherface was near. So, I mean, I was scared of absolutely everything. Um, this movie didn't seem to have that same effect on me as a kid. Maybe because it was black and white, it didn't jump out at me as much. But it's the same time, I still never watched the whole thing either. I would only see bits and pieces here and there. As I grew up then and started finally getting into horror movies, and of course now it's my absolute number one passion. Um, it still took me quite some time. I think just because there was so much new stuff I was watching, and I was brand new to this, that I was watching current stuff. It still took me quite some time to go back and watch Psycho. But I remember the first time I did. That I sat down and watched the movie from beginning to end, I immediately loved it. And as I said earlier, I had a friend who'd never seen the movie. I recently watched it with them so they could see it for the first time, and they had a lot of uncertainties about it going in because they were not a big fan of black and white movies and knew how much older the movie was, and were afraid that, and they were afraid it was going to be a boring, no good film. They actually really enjoyed it to the point that they've watched some sequels since then of this, the Psycho franchise. So, um, and when I watched it this last time and seeing it again with them, I still love it just as much now as I did the first time that I actually watched the film. I just think Psycho was such a classic, such a great movie. We'll get into that here again towards the end. But saying all that just to say that I don't find the opening slow. I do see how some people could, but I think it does a great job of setting the tone. I think it does a great job of setting everything up, uh, giving us a story, and I think that Janet Leigh's performance is good and strong enough that it's carrying things along well enough, despite a few questions here and there. And then when you get to the actual motel and her interaction with Norman, played by Anthony Perkins, um, I will say that I feel like, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that agree with me, but Anthony Perkins' performance as Norman, in my opinion, is one of the best, greatest performances ever in a horror movie. I think Anthony Perkins did an amazing job portraying Norman Bates. I just thought it was absolutely incredible. Um, to the point that, there are certain horror franchises. And again, I don't want to get into a lot of other stuff right now, but uh, when you look at A Nightmare on Elm Street, the first thing I think of, and I think the first thing most people think of, is Robert Englund as Freddy. It's still to this day hard to imagine anyone else playing Freddy, and that's one of a lot of people's biggest knocks with that remake is that someone else playing Freddy just wasn't the same thing. I feel the same way about Brad Dourif voicing Chucky. When I think Chucky from the Child's Play franchise or the Chucky franchise, it's the same thing. I can't imagine anyone else ever doing that voice, and I'm not a huge, don't want to get into too much, but a huge fan of that remake either. And again, because it's just not Chucky to me, it's not the same without it being Brad Dourif. I feel very similar to that with Anthony Perkins' portrayal of Norman Bates. It's just so absolutely amazing. I know there was a remake, I believe, in like 1998, and maybe at some point I'll cover that. There's so much other stuff that I want to get to as well, but maybe some point I'll cover that. Um, Without getting into my opinion on that movie, I'll just say that I believe it was, oh my gosh, I can see him. Everybody knows his name. The guy that played Norman in the remake. I feel so ridiculous that I can't think of his name right now. It's just totally fun. He's a good actor. I have no problem with this guy, but he's not Norman. That's Anthony Perkins. I just thinking that Anthony Perkins' performance is absolutely amazing um, as Norman, and it's just incredible. He does such a great job with this. And so the beginning there, when we get the interaction between Marion and Norman, I think it's very good. Uh, Anthony Perkins' performance is great. Janet Leigh's performance is good. Um, we get their relationship somewhat built there a little bit in that little bit of time, and you can see Norman's interest in her. We also then get the introduction as he persuades her to eat dinner with him before she goes to her room and goes to bed. He goes up into his house that he lives in behind the hotel, and he's going to get dinner, and you get to hear Mother for the first time. And she overhears it as well. Marion overhears Norman arguing with his mother about the girl that he's preparing dinner for, and um, you kind of then, once he gets back with the dinner and they begin to discuss Norman's mother, you get really the first insight into seeing that there's something wrong. Because I think one of the things about this character is that you like Norman. You find yourself liking Norman. And even though you start to realize that he's crazy and that there's issues, you don't want it to be so. Like you don't want him to be behind all of this. You want Norman to be the good guy. I mean, you really like him. And I think that's because of Anthony Perkins' performance. But you begin to see some of that craziness when Marion mentions to him about putting his mother into a home. You can see that sets something off in Norman a little bit. And then we get into from there, she goes off to her room and she gets ready to shower and go to bed. And we also hear from their conversation that she's realized how far, she's realized she's kind of had a wake up call. What am I doing? And she has decided to, even though she doesn't tell Norman what she did or what she's going to do, we know from conversations that, she tells him she's going back to try to fix a mistake that she made. So her plan is to shower, go to bed, and then take the money back and see if she can't avoid being in too much trouble. But then we get that classic Psycho shower scene where it appears that Mother come and stabs Marion while she's in the shower. Um, Classic score, which I will say, when I first started watching horror movies and really got into them big time, and even up until just the last couple of years, a few movies had a score that really caught my attention. I mean, there's some classics out there that do, but most of the time, I didn't really notice scores that often until really more the last couple of years. They've started to stand out to me a little bit more here and there. I think the score in Psycho is very good, very, very well done for that as well. And you know, she gets killed in the shower. I can see how, again, what we see today is so much different, so much more graphic. Um, but I can see how, knowing the kind of films that were coming out in 1960, I can see how this shower scene would be shocking. I can see how it would scare people. I can see how it would really become something to talk about. And I think it still looks pretty good, all things considered. You have to know, you have to remind yourself that you're watching a movie from 1960. But even in doing so, I think it still looks good. The sound is good. Despite how loud the score is, you still can hear the stabbing taking place. And I just think the scene still looks great. It's such a classic scene. It still holds up very, very well. And then, you get Norman arguing with Mother again and him trying to clean up the mess and hide what's done. And then we kind of, it's one place where Psycho throws you off, especially if you're going back and watching it now after all this time. Is now we're so used to the final girl and final characters and that kind of thing that we root for that come out at the end of the whole movie. Psycho does that so much differently because in today's world, she would be your final girl, and you would be, um, she's your main person there, and you're expecting to see her all the way up until the end of the film, and now she's been killed off about halfway through it. So, another little thing there that Psycho does differently that I think still is very good. And now we kind of shift gears to her sister Lila and her boyfriend Sam looking for her because she's gone missing as far as they know. They don't know that she's dead. And, private investigator is also hired by her boss because he has also now realized that she took the money and took off. And so he's hired a private investigator. There's so many people looking for her. A lot of roads are leading back to, the Bates Motel. We get to the scene where the private investigator gets killed. I think this scene is still very well done. It seems very quick, but I think it's just shot well. As he's going up the stairs in the house and Mother comes out and stabs him, and then you get I forgot the terminology for it, but a good camera view of when he's falling back down the stairs after he's been stabbed. We get to follow up with that then, with uh, Marion's sister Lila and Sam continuing themselves to try to investigate. They really feel like that there's something um, to the hotel that either Norman has done something to Marion or that she's still there and hiding. And so they go out to the hotel and are trying to figure everything out themselves. And there is a scene then where Sam is supposed to be distracting Norman, supposed to be talking to him and keeping him busy while Lila sneaks up to the house and goes in and looks around to see if she can find Marion. Here's one of the biggest questions I have with this film. And as you can tell, I love the movie, so I'm not saying this detracts me enough from enjoying the film, but it is something that I question tremendously. Is that when I watch this movie, and I know that Sam is supposed to be distracting Norman and keeping him occupied so that Lila can go investigate, I don't understand the way Sam did it because you would think that he would be trying to buddy up to Norman. You would think that he would be trying to steer conversation away from anything that would stir up question in Norman. And instead, he's basically just verbally attacking Norman um, to the point that he makes things worse instead of better because now Lila's in the house and she's looking around. And Sam, instead of distracting Norman, has Norman now wondering where Lila's at and asking where she's gone, and then they get into a little bit of a scuffle, and it's just I don't understand Sam's thought process and what he was trying to do. Um, I really, the gentleman, John Gavin, I believe his name, that played Sam throughout this film, as good as I think the acting is in this movie, and as great as some of the performances were, I didn't really buy his performance. I didn't think his performance was anywhere near as good as everyone else's. Now I think everyone else's performances are so good that it makes up for it. So again, it doesn't cause me to not enjoy the film. But if I had to pick one person in the movie that I didn't think did a good job, it would be him. Um, and then again, I just question his character decisions. Again, I know that's not on the actor; that's the way it was written. But that's the one thing about this film that I do question is I don't understand that character's thought process in trying to distract Norman so that Lila could go look around the house for Marion. He didn't distract him; he just pushed him and made it worse, and that bothers me a little bit on why that's the way that went. Um, Norman then is taken off to the house now, and Lila's trying to not only find Marion, but now she realizes Norman has entered the house as well, so she's trying to hide. And then we get another big scene where she goes into the fruit cellar and she ends up discovering Mother, which at that point we realize is actually a mummified corpse that Norman has kept all this time. And I'm sure in 1960 this scene looked really good. It's about the only scene that I don't think looks good in this movie. I just didn't think that part looked as great. Again, I'm sure for 1960, when she thinks there's someone sitting in the chair, she spins it around and realizes it's a mummified corpse. I'm sure in 1960 it looked great and really shocked everyone. I don't think it looks that good, but I'm sure that's the best they could do in 1960. So I understand that. I just don't think that particular part holds up as well as the rest of the film does. And then Norman gets in, and we discover that he is dressed as Mother, and that's kind of when we get the reveal that that's what's been happening. Is Norman's got the split personality. He dresses as Mother and kills people. Um, and just as he's about to attack her, Sam comes in behind him and grabs him. This scene bothers me a little bit as well, kind of this whole part, because it just doesn't look great the way they shot this, with Sam holding on to Norman from behind so that he can't attack Lila. It just doesn't look good. It looks like he's barely got a hold of him, and the way Norman is wrestling with him, it like, how is he not able to pull away from that? I mean, it looks like he could break free at any moment. It's just, I don't believe that scene looks good the whole way around. I just don't. And I know it's a huge part of the film. I understand that. I just don't think that holds up as well from the way the corpse looks to their little scuffle there at the end. That part is really the only part of this movie that I don't think looks good. But then from there, now Norman's been caught, and we get to the scene at the police station where everything is now revealed. They do find out that Marion has been killed. Um, a psychologist reveals Norman's history and the split personality, and how he thought he was his mother and that kind of thing. And we get a little bit of information on Norman and his background, that he killed his mother and her boyfriend after his father passed away. And you get more insight into Norman there a little bit. And then you do get another great scene that looks incredible at the very end, where Norman is sitting in the jail cell, um, but you hear Mother's voice talking, and it just, the look on Anthony Perkins' face is just so classic and looks so great. And that's then the end of the film. I've heard a few people, like I said, I listen to a lot of horror movie podcasts, and I've heard a few people kind of comment that whole speech from the psychologist they didn't think was necessary. We just watched everything take place. We didn't need the psychologist to rehearse it for us. It doesn't bother me. I think it's good. I think it's a good wrap up for the film, and gives just a little more insight. Other than everything you just saw, it does give you a little more insight. So I think it's a fine way to end the film. And then again, that last shot looks great. So that's pretty much Psycho from 1960. I think, again, overall, I think this is such a fantastic film. From the performance of Anthony Perkins, to the story, the plot, uh, the the movie ran very smoothly. I thought, I didn't feel like there were a lot of a lot of drags and just lulls and that kind of thing. Just really had that one part towards the end that kind of bothered me a little bit. But other than that, I think the movie is so very, very well done and still holds up so very, very well. I rate movies on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being excellent, 4 being very good, 3 being good, average, 2 being not good, and 1 being horrible. On a scale of 1 to 5, I would give Psycho, I think, a 4.5. When I talked about this movie on the previous channel that I had, and I believe I gave it a 4 at that time. And one of my friends was like, I loved your review, but I disagree. The movie's a 5. And then, after he and I talked about it a little bit, and I've gone back and watched it again, he might be right. It might be a 5. But after watching it again recently, I think I'm going to go a 4.5. It's not quite excellent. It's not quite there. It's so close. I wanted to give it a 5, but I think just that big reveal at the end, because again, that is the big reveal. That's the huge part, and it just kind of falls flat for me with the way they do it. I think that's what brings the movie down just a little bit for me. Overall, I think it was great, but that big reveal at the end, your big final scene, for that to be the weakest scene in the film brings it down just a little bit to me. So I will go 4.5 out of 5, right there between very good and excellent. Still an amazing film. I still highly recommend it. I'll definitely watch it again. And at some point through doing this channel, I do plan on covering some more of the franchise from Psycho, because I think it's, again, I think Psycho is so huge and so influential in the rest of horror from that point on. So that's my review of Psycho. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, please hit the subscribe button, uh, hit the like button on the video, and then let me know what you think. I want to hear from you. I want to interact with you. I want to know your thoughts on Psycho. Do you enjoy it as much as I do? Do you not enjoy it? Do you like it better? Do you disagree with some of my takes on it or agree with them? Let me know your thoughts on Psycho. And follow me on social media if you don't already. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, either at Sean's Horror Corner, or I will say on X, used to be Twitter, it's just My Horror Corner. Sean's Horror Corner was too many characters. Couldn't get it all in there, so I just had to put My Horror Corner there. But every place else, it's Sean's Horror Corner, or you can just look me up by name, Sean Rhodes. So follow me on social media. I will do my best to follow you back. And like I said, subscribe, like, comment. And thank you so much for watching. Next episode, I'm going to be talking about another classic. I'll be talking about Bob Clark's Black Christmas from 1974. I look forward to talking about that with you, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much.